players should you pick up before the fantasy football playoffs? What's going on, football fans and fantasy freaks? It's Mitch here with the 10 must-add players that can help you win your fantasy championship. So if you're in the business of winning and holding that fantasy championship in your hands and bragging to all your league mates, then you must listen. And you must spike the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to OwnersBox Fantasy for more fantasy football content throughout the rest of the fantasy football playoffs. But here are the 10 must-add players before Week 15, aka the first round of your fantasy championship run. These players are gems. And these players, I think one or two of them may be available and they might be able to help you. So let's get started with the running back position and the player that I think could have the greatest impact in the fantasy playoffs dependent on injury, and that is Patrick Taylor Jr. of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I did not foresee the 49ers ripping the Chicago Bears up in Week 14. An absolute outrageous performance by the 49ers that nobody saw coming, but now they have a big game on Thursday night. Because of that win over Chicago at home, they have another game at home, short week against the Rams. Rams beat the Bills, huge game in the NFC West. But Isaac Guerendo, the superstar that I said pick him up because he's so good, he's fast, he can hit explosive plays, he was going to be Shanahan's go-to guy for the rest of the year. Well, now he might not play this Thursday. So if you need a flex, if you need an RB2, if you're a little bit fragile at running back, this guy should be owned in every league, and he should at least be started by somebody in the fantasy playoffs. Patrick Taylor Jr., if he is the starting running back for the 49ers, if Guerendo is out, he will be that, right? He has been the primary 2 when Guerendo was the starter. He's the primary 3 when Mason was the starter. Therefore, it's just logical that Taylor would become the pure starter if Guerendo is out. And it's possible that he is out. It's not 100% confirmed, but it's definitely worth the waiver wire claim and the ad, right? Like 7 rushes for 25 yards and a touchdown last week. I like Taylor. I like his power. I like his size. He brings something a little bit different to the 49ers, which I think is an in-between-the-tackles grinder. He's not the same in terms of elusiveness or quickness or vision of Christian McCaffrey. He doesn't have the straight line speed of Guerendo, but he does have good power, and he is somewhat similar to Mason in that regard. So I think at the very least, he is a flex for the rest of the time that he is the starter. And even if Guerendo returns, there's always a chance of a re-injury. On top of that, Taylor is the number 2 behind Guerendo, which makes him a handcuff. On top of that, he also has his separate value as a short yardage back, as the power back between the two. So regardless of really the outcome, he is a must-add in every single fantasy league because of the upside of owning the number 1 back in the 49er backfield. Patrick Taylor is first and foremost. Second, Sincere McCormick. The only reason Sincere McCormick is really sincerely not number 1 is because he's on the Raiders. And now the Raiders have lost Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, which means they're thrusting the worst quarterback in football, Desmond Ridder, behind center, which is not great. But I will say, as somebody that picked up Sincere McCormick myself, I was not happy about his performance against Tampa Bay. He saw plenty of touches. He saw plenty of work. 15 carries, 78 yards on the ground. He had 2 catches on 3 targets for 11 yards. And the week previous, he had 12 carries unexpectedly against the Chiefs, his breakout game, for 64 yards. And the only running back in the NFL this year to go over 60 yards against the Chiefs, as we proclaimed last week and as we discussed last week, right? But McCormick backed it up with a good game against a solid run defense in Tampa Bay, and he actually backed it up with more touches, just as Antonio Pierce thought he might get, right? Like, That was a big reason why we liked McCormick as a start last week because, okay, Pierce said he's going to get even more touches than the Chiefs game. And yeah, he didn't score a touchdown. He didn't put up big output. But when you get 15 touches on the ground, there's only so much more that you can really get, right? Like, eventually that's going to turn into a touchdown, right? So he looks good, right? He's making people miss. He's breaking tackles. He's doing the little things exceptionally well. He's more efficient than every other Raider running back we've seen this year. Like, he is the best runner they have. He is their starter for the rest of the year. And he's one of their young prospects that they actually have to showcase for the rest of the season, right? So McCormick to me is a must add this week. If he hasn't already been added, he should be added. The third running back that probably has not been added in a majority of leagues is Isaiah Davis of the New York Jets. I was even sleeping on Isaiah Davis. Me, okay? Because I thought, okay, Breece Hall would be out. I didn't really know for how long, right? That was kind of a weird thing because it was later in the week. It was after the waiver wire. It was kind of awkward, right? We all thought that Allen would be the guy, all that stuff, right? That makes sense because Allen has been the guy. But Isaiah Davis became the 1B to the 1A of Allen, and in some cases might be more productive for fantasy. Why? Because he brings a receiving skill set to the table. 3 catches, 27 yards on 6 targets from Aaron Rodgers against the Miami Dolphins in a game in which it was high scoring. He also had a touchdown, 40 yards rushing, and 10 attempts. The week before that, even with Breece Hall still in the lineup, he saw rushing production. He also saw 3 catches for 28 yards and a touchdown. So obviously someone in New York likes him, whether it's the coach, the offensive coordinator, or Aaron Rodgers himself. Davis is getting opportunity because he's slippery, he's quick, he's got smooth transition to the passing game, he can run routes, and he has that explosiveness that complements a big, powerful back like Allen exceptionally well as the in-between the tackles grinder, right? So think of Davis as the Garendo to the Patrick Taylor, or to the Jordan Mason, I should say, right? So that is Isaiah Davis, the change of pace back. But it feels like he's going to get plenty of work alongside Allen, and it was much more of a split than we would have expected. So he's even a borderline flex play in a matchup against Jacksonville coming up, depending on how desperate you are for players this week. But certainly worth an add because he has an exceptional upside, exceptional ceiling. With Breece Hall likely out for the rest of the year, if Allen does go down, Davis becomes that much more of an absolute lock for efficiency, for production. So those are our top 3 running backs. I do want to say that an honorable mention goes out to Sean Tucker of Tampa Bay. No graphic needed for Sean Tucker. We know Sean Tucker is an explosive back, and when he gets opportunity, he is really, really fantastic. 3 attempts, 47 yards, 2 targets last week, okay? And that was because Bucky Irving looked banged up. Please pay attention to Bucky Irving moving forward because if Irving is beat up, Sean Tucker is worth a claim because he's exceptionally good at football. And when you're good at football, you're worth a claim in fantasy football. So, just saying. At the wide receiver position, if Adam Thielen is not added in your league, if he's not on a roster, I don't know what you're doing, why you're standing still. Get your phone out, get to your fantasy football app right now and put in a claim for Adam Thielen. I do not care what your league you're in. Maybe if you're in a 4-man league, you can leave Adam Thielen alone. If you're in an 8-man league, he should be owned in your league. If you're in a 10-man league, 12-man league, PPR, standard, half P, it doesn't matter. Adam Thielen's got to be owned in your league at this point. Okay? We talked about last week and the week before, I feel like I've talked about Adam Thielen a lot. Because Adam Thielen at one point was an exceptionally fantastic, phenomenal wide receiver that was one of the best in football, Pro Bowl every single year, right? With the Vikings. He's not that anymore. But last year, at the old ripe age of like 4,000, he caught 100 balls from Bryce Young, right? 100. That doesn't just happen. He's got great rapport with this young quarterback, and I'm starting to believe Bryce Young is actually decent at football now. He's turned the switch. He's turned a corner. Like something has happened to Bryce Young. I don't know what, but it's happened. And Adam Thielen has gone 23 points and 19 points back to back. He has 17 catches in 2 games, guys. 17 catches for 200 yards and a touchdown in 2 games. So that means Adam Thielen is a start. He is a pickup. He is a start And I'm not even worried who he's playing because he just played the Philadelphia Eagles secondary. The Philadelphia Eagles, who are the best defense in the league, and he ripped them up. They couldn't cover the old white receiver, bro. They couldn't cover. He looked like 2009 Wes Welker, 2014 Jordy Nelson. He couldn't be covered. So Adam Thielen has to be picked up, and he actually has to be started, especially if you're in a PPR league. He is a top 4 option at wide receiver in every lineup, pretty much, unless you've got an absolute all-star team, okay? Cedric Tillman is the next option that is probably not going to start on your team, but he is very interesting. And the reason I say that is he had a 3-week stretch of 18-plus fantasy points. 18 points, 28 points, 19 points in PPR. Then, he had an 8-target game against New Orleans where it only resulted in 7 fantasy points, but still 8 targets. Then he was injured versus Pittsburgh in a snow game, okay? He didn't do very much. He's had a concussion, not some sort of physical limitation, upper body, lower body, right? Concussion, which means he'll be good to go, running-wise, physicality-wise, in his next matchup here against the Chiefs. The Chiefs have struggled a little bit against the pass lately. If you do need a spot start, I think Tillman could be interesting because Jerry Jeudy will likely draw Trent McDuffie. The Chiefs have been struggling with outside perimeter wide receivers. Tillman is one of those guys, and Winston really seemed to have a rapport with him, and he gave him a lot of opportunity, a lot of targets. And Tillman looked the part as a X-receiver in the NFL. Big frame, physicality, really good hands, the ability to work the intermediate level, take a hit, make a play. So Tillman is a guy that I think could have been dropped that you could benefit from picking up now that he's back from the concussion. The third wide receiver that I think you should pick up is Josh Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers. Palmer, I thought, was going to be the guy in LA. I was wrong about that. I'm not right about everything. This was one of the things I was wrong about. It ended up being the rookie Ladd McConkey. But now that Ladd McConkey may be injured for longer than expected, Palmer could stand up and be their guy, right? Like last week against the Chiefs, they finally figured out that Josh Palmer is good at football, and they started playing him and working him into the offense and making him a main target in the offense. And he showed up as Herbert's best option to throw the football to without McConkey and Will Dissly going down, who is now out for a couple of weeks. 6 catches, 78 yards on 9 targets against the Chiefs. I don't think it's any fluke. So if Ladd McConkey is out, I think Palmer is definitely a start, especially in deeper leagues. I think, especially against Tampa Bay, a defense that's terrible against the pass and won't have Antoine Winfield Jr., Josh Palmer could be a very interesting, sneaky start in week 15. The tight end position. I have 2 names for you. 2 guys that were on bye weeks that could have been dropped. Okay, both of these guys have been top 11 options at the tight end position since week 6. First, we've got Zach Ertz of the Washington Commanders, the old man who's a borderline Hall of Famer in my book. He has had 6 out of his last 8 games go for 10-plus points in fantasy. That's consistency. At tight end, you don't find a lot of consistency. You don't find a lot of volume, targets, all that stuff. Ertz has been earning those targets. So I think he's a guy that you can rely on a pretty solid floor for the rest of the season, right? 18 points, 15 points, 12 points in a row these last couple of games, and 6 out of 8 with 10-plus points. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for volume. I'm looking for a floor. I'm not finding Brock Bowers on the waiver wire, but I can find Brock Bowers light in old man Zach Ertz. And then the other option is Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry of the Patriots. Zach Ertz of the Commanders. Both guys had buys during week 14. Henry also had a bye. He's tight end 10 since week 6. Why is week 6 important? That's when Drake May became the starter for the Patriots. So ever since Hunter Henry got Drake May at quarterback, he's been a top 10 option at this position. And despite that, he might have been dropped because of week 14, the mayhem on the waiver wire, especially if you're in a thinner league, okay? So Hunter Henry, 5 12-plus fantasy point weeks during this stretch from week 6 on. 5 12-plus point weeks, and not a lot of inconsistency at all. So Hunter Henry is certainly one of the better receivers on the Patriots, one of the more consistent chain movers, one of the more dependent red zone threats for Drake May. And May played his best game against the Colts right before the bye, and he could be playing even better post-bye now against the Cardinals. Now, transitioning smoothly to young Drake May, he's one of the quarterbacks I would consider for Week 15. He takes on the Cardinals. I think they're 20th against quarterbacks. They're not bad against quarterbacks, but I think Drake May is more of the reason and the game state that could take place. The game is in Arizona. Drake had his best game as a pro before the bye week, okay? He was exceptional against the Colts. They punted one time. They were stopped one time. The only reason the Patriots were stopped against the Colts, I would consider the Colts to be about the same range as the Cardinals defensively, maybe a little bit better. They missed a 27-yard field goal, and Hunter Henry, funny enough, dropped the ball for an interception at the 1-yard line. Drake May could have had a 30-point fantasy day against Indianapolis, and that would have blown up the waiver wire, right? He's probably still on your waiver wire. Now he's coming back from a bye. As a rookie, that's highly beneficial. He gets to look at all his tape. He gets to look at what he's done well, what he's not done so well, what they can improve upon within the offense, what they can add to the offense, maybe a little bit more with his legs because he's an exceptional runner. In fact, he currently has the highest yards per carry in NFL history in an NFL season, not just rookies. It's higher than Michael Vick. His yards per carry as a runner is 9+ yards, which is insane. So Drake May is an exceptional athlete. He's also going to be a smart quarterback that's going to be willing to learn from his mistakes, probably grow from those mistakes. We've seen him just get better with every week as an NFL quarterback, and I think he could have a huge game against the Cardinals in a game in which Kyler and Arizona, they're going to be able to run the ball on New England. They're going to be able to move the ball on New England. They're going to be able to score points, which means that Drake's going to have to be chasing this game. They're going to have to be throwing the ball. He's going to have to be running. He's going to have to be scrambling. He's going to have to put the offense on his back, and it's going to lead to fantasy points. So I could see a little bit of a shootout there against the Cardinals in Arizona. So I like Drake a ton in Week 15. The matchups with Buffalo are kind of tough later in the year. Maybe you're willing to let him go after this week. But if you're not great at quarterback in Week 15 and you need a guy with a little bit of a ceiling, I think Drake certainly gives you that because he's an exceptional runner and athlete, and he also has a pretty interesting game state against the Cardinals. Then you look at Jameis Winston, Mr. Aura himself, the most entertaining football player in the NFL, Jameis Winston. This week, he plays the Chiefs, and I discussed a little bit with Cedric Tillman how I feel like you can throw the ball against the Chiefs. That might not have looked like the case, against the Chargers, because the Chargers had no receivers besides Josh Palmer, our boy. But other than that, they couldn't separate. They couldn't make a lot of plays until the late part of the game. But we saw that Bryce Young and the Panthers were able to throw the ball against them. We've seen teams lately throw the ball against this Chiefs defense, and I think Jameis could see similar results with David Njoku, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman. I think they can air it out, okay? That being said, what you really want to acquire Jameis for is Week 16 against the Bengals. Because quite frankly, the Bengals could not stop a CFL offense. They could not stop a CFL offense. They are that bad. They are historically bad, in my opinion. Watching them, just with the eye test. I don't even know the stats. The Bengals have an eye test, one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. They are the third worst team against quarterbacks in the NFL in fantasy. And Jameis has gone nuclear 3 times already. He's had 23 fantasy points 3 different times already as a short-term starter in this league. And that could be an absolute shootout. That game might be 45-40. And Jameis might throw 7 touchdowns, 3 to the other team and 4 to his own team, but it will work out for fantasy points. So Jameis Winston is absolutely going to fill your team with aura and fantasy points in Week 16. But Week 15 is also really interesting if you don't have a great quarterback position. Those are the 10 players that I would add before Week 15 to help you win your championship. I do want to just give a defense because it's the playoffs and defenses matter. So we're adding one more onto this list. That is the Washington Commanders defense versus the New Orleans Saints. And the reason I added Washington here to the list of ads, is because they're largely unowned in a lot of leagues because Washington is not a great defense. They're not a great fantasy defense. But this is an exceptional matchup, exceptional spot. The game is at home. They play the Saints without Derek Carr, without Chris Olave, without Rashid Shaheed, without Taysom Hill, without part of their offensive line. This Saints offense has nothing left. They have a rookie or a backup quarterback starting. We don't yet know exactly who it will be. If it's Spencer Rattler, goodness me, it's going to be a 20 fantasy point day for the Commanders. On top of that, Marshawn Lattimore might have a revenge game in this game. Marshawn Lattimore might be playing in this game for the first time after the bye week. Dan Quinn will have his bye week tweaks on top of that defensively to be able to make this unit better for the stretch run and the playoff run. And this game is essential for the Commanders to win to keep their hopes for a wild card spot in the NFC. So this is an absolutely beautiful matchup for the Commanders in the first round of the fantasy playoffs. Those are your waiver wire ads that will help you win your fantasy championship. Thank you guys for watching. Gronk, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for the starts and the sits on Thursday. Deuces.